Which side did you come from? But just so you know what I'm doing, we also added club row as a student stuff. Since nobody's in club row, we just put them in the front row right there. And like that was, they have a great quality receive, but it's just so you know who the guy in the center is. Okay.
Like I wanted to figure out behind the I'm a big for next time. I was like a beta
Yes.
Take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. Up you go. As our first order of business, please direct your attention to a short video that we've created for tonight's event.
Newark, New Jersey, home to 300,000 souls. A vibrant, diverse city with a rich history. A hub for commerce and transportation in the Northeast. But a city that was torn apart in the 1960s by riots, the highways that cut through long-established neighborhoods, and the flight of manufacturing. Today, signs of rebirth are all around. NJPAC is a cultural institution second to none, showcasing performers from around the world. Spectators flock to the Prudential Center to see everything from the Devils to Cirque du Soleil. Prudential itself, the venerable insurance company that has anchored downtown Newark for decades, has a shiny new building. Boutique hotels are coming in, so is a Whole Foods, and residential developments like Teachers Village. Has Newark's Renaissance finally arrived? But who makes the decisions about what's built, and, especially important, who frames the conversation? As we discuss Newark's future, we must ask who speaks for the people who already call the city home. Who gives voice to the poor, the tech community, the visionaries? Does the media have it right? And which media? Hyperlocal blogs, artists, or major newspapers? This is our subject tonight.
Welcome. I'm Harold Brown, Director of the School of Communication and Media at Montclair State University. We're happy to have you with us tonight. Montclair State's Engage Local Conference, which starts tonight and continues through tomorrow evening, is a national opportunity for immersion in the art of community engagement by media organizations. You can find out more about our conference, this is the kickoff event of it, at engagelocal.org. That's engagelocal.org. We open our conference tonight with a conversation with members of the Newark community on the question of redevelopment. Montclair State has partnered with the American Society of News Editors to host this discussion as part of their National Community and News Literacy Roundtable project, an initiative spearheaded by the American Society of News Editors in partnership with the American Press Institute and the News Literacy Project, and funded in part by the Robert R. McCormick Foundation. We thank them for their support. There are people in attendance here I want to acknowledge before we go further. First of all, a welcome to someone for whom this program could not have happened without their support. That is Dr. Susan Cole, President of Montclair State. Dr. Cole, thank you. We're also joined by Clark Bell of the McCormick Foundation. Thank you for your support. Thank you, Clark. And by Chris Peck, President of the American Society of News Editors. Thank you, Chris. Before we begin our conversation, a bit of housekeeping. A reminder, please silence your cell phones. We encourage you, however, to tweet with those same cell phones using the hashtag #ChangingNewark. That's #ChangingNewark. We're also joined tonight by a wider national and international audience via our live stream of the event, which can be found at engagelocal.org/livestream. That's engagelocal.org/livestream. Share that as you see fit. To add as many voices and perspectives as we could to this complex subject, we've invited a dozen or so community leaders to join us in the front, and we'll bring them into the conversation as best we can. These opinion leaders are also listed in your program. We also want to hear from as many of you in attendance as possible, and we have 2 microphones set up to accommodate that. I'd also like to cover just a ground rule or two for our conversation tonight in our efforts to hold as civil and productive a discussion as possible. We ask that people express themselves in a respectful way that promotes open dialogue, that we don't interrupt each other, that we speak only for ourselves, and that we seek to understand each other's viewpoints. As the moderator, I will be rigorous about maintaining a respectful setting and in limiting the amount of time each person is able to speak at the mic. We'll keep audience questions and commentary to a limit of about 1.5 minutes in an effort to bring in as many voices as possible. Furthermore, you were all given an index card when you came in for thoughts or questions, and we'll collect them periodically to try to bring those questions and comments into our discussion. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to introduce our distinguished panelists. Derek Warre, 2 people over to my left, is the publisher of locallynewark.com, created in 2008 as Newark's first hyper-local news site. He has a BS and an MS in economics from Rutgers and an MBA from Seton Hall University. To my immediate left, Akintola Hanif, a photojournalist and filmmaker, is one of the highest profile artists in our community. His works have been featured in venues such as Danny Simmons Corridor Gallery, Algira, a Center for Contemporary Art, and Newark Museum. His research interest is heavily rooted in cross-cultural photojournalism, fine art photography, media coverage, and documentation of the quality of life, education, and class issues in our community and throughout the region. Welcome, Akintola. To Derek's left is Dale Russakoff, for 28 years, a journalist at the Washington Post, someone I worked with many years ago in another life. She was born and raised in the fine city of Birmingham, Alabama. She's proudly a product of public schools and graduated from Harvard, where her love of newspaper journalism began and continued through multiple jobs across the industry. She recently completed her first book, The Prize, Who's in Charge of America's Schools, about Mark Zuckerberg's $100 million gift to the Newark schools. It will be published in September by Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. Welcome, Dale. To Dale's immediate left is one of the most distinguished attorneys in Newark, Frank Giannamonte, a member of a distinguished law firm here who is practicing real estate development and land use group. He has over 3 decades of experience on all aspects of real estate acquisition, sales development, complex commercial transactions, and chancery litigation. He's recognized as a leader in planning, zoning, and development law, including tax abatement law for the city of Newark and urban areas. Welcome, Frank. And to his left, finally, is Baye Adolfo Wilson, Deputy Mayor for Economic and Housing Development of the city of Newark, a native of Harlem, New York. School. He has served in the Army. He went to law school and returned to Newark, where he worked as a staff attorney at Essex Newark Legal Services. He has co-founded and became the national co-chair of the National Hip Hop Political Convention. He co-founded and was the executive director of the Lincoln Park Post Cultural District. His accomplishments throughout the Newark are well known to many of you, In addition, he was a Loeb Fellow at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. His role in Newark is the one that's obvious and important to this conversation. Welcome, Deputy Mayor. So without further ado, you now know who the panelists are. It's a distinguished group for sure. I'd like to begin the conversation by asking each of them, beginning to my immediate left and to go around, to ask you to state your thesis about where we are in the context of the evolution of Newark and how you see the current trends of development and gentrification. Where is Newark as a snapshot of this moment in time?
I think that we're in a place, and I'm sure you all have heard this comparison a lot, but I think we're like where Brooklyn was 10 years ago. So Newark is just beginning to really see the effects of gentrification, and the revitalization and gentrification, like where we're at, to me, it's like we're in the middle of a lot. Yes, there's revitalization in terms of economics and in terms of, the artistic community and the retail community, but there's no social, renaissance happening. And gentrification just is what it is, like this panel is this conversation, gentrification or renaissance. Anybody with half of a brain knows that they're both happening simultaneously. There's no or, it's both happening. And we're just not really being honest about where we're at. Even when I look around, it's a predominantly white audience in a predominantly black town. I don't say that in a racist way at all. I was born in Brooklyn Heights, raised around middle-class white people. But the people of the community just aren't being included in this conversation or in the development in the way that anyone with half a heart would really see as fair. So that's my take.
And we'll come back in the second go around to the panel. Thank you, Arthur. We'll come back in the second round of the panel to the very important point that Arthur just made about media communication and how this discussion actually is going to transpire over the coming important years in Newark. Derek?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. My role is pretty much twofold. One is a community journalist and one is a community leader. And for the last 25 years, I've actually lived in the downtown. And when we moved here, there was pretty much nothing here. There was one building, Renaissance Towers, was built in 1985, and it had Renaissance in the name, and I got bought into the concept of Newark coming back. And since that time, Newark has had 3 resurrections of Renaissance, and now when I saw the news article of Is Newark the Next Brooklyn, I got excited to say, finally, after 30 years, Newark is finally on its way to a renaissance, and hopefully now the market will now take over where we can now have these great stores and shops that we have known for. So I come from it from that view of a long-term downtown resident, which is really where the major conversation happens about gentrification and renaissance. And as I mentioned to you, the classic definition of gentrification is normally outplacing someone. This is just a scholastic definition. And when we moved downtown Newark, there was no one here. You had retail level on the first floor, and all of these 8-story buildings were pretty much vacant on every floor going up. And we understand what happened. Real estate developers bought this at low prices during the riots. And they were pretty much able to manage the mortgage plus whatever taxes they needed based on the assessed value and just the rents of the retail space. And so now that we're talking now of bringing residents to the downtown, we're not talking about displacing people that lived in these apartments and then were priced out. We're talking about taking industrial office space and converting that into residential housing and then starting to build out the retail around it to support it. And so with that, I'm excited about the new changes that are happening. And by the way, I do still live downtown, and so I do see some of the pressures of large institutions coming closer to neighborhoods. And really, I live in a neighborhood that has gone through gentrification probably 30 years ago, and we're still growing. And some of my neighbors remind me of the positive stories that once new people came into a community, how they revitalized the community, and that was not expected. So I want to have that conversation with both Renaissance, talking about the change of the community. That is an example, I believe, from the institution. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Dale, your thesis on all?
Well, I come to this not as somebody involved in economic development, but as a almost lifelong journalist. And I've been covering Newark off and on since the mid-90s, and I think this is the third time that the public conversation has been, Newark is just about to explode and come back and be the city, the grand city it once was. So I think it's kind of early to say where Newark is and what's happening, but the perspective that I have is, as Meryl said, I just finished writing a book for the last almost 5 years on Mark Zuckerberg's $100 million gift to the Newark schools. And I see a real parallel between some of the conditions surrounding the Zuckerberg gift and the development that's going on in Newark. And the main parallel I see is the absence of a vibrant press, a journalistic voice to cover what's going on and to inform the citizens about what's happening all around them. I think everybody knows that a lot of voices were kept out of the conversation about education reform, and it had fairly dire consequences in terms of community peace and some of the real results of education reform in Newark. And I think it's just really development.
Hopefully, journalistic voice is.
I meant that as the word.
Very.
Yes.
Thank you, Frank.
Well, I'm kind of confused in how to answer you because my grandfather arrived in Newark in 1892 and lived in Newark until his death in the 40s. My father was born in 03, lived in Newark until his death in 78. My mother was born in Newark at 14 and lived until her death in 05. I was born in Newark in 55, and I moved out of Newark the first time when I was 40, so I'm 60. I can answer you as a Newark, as someone who lived here and has vivid memories of Newark pre-riots, Newark during riots, Newark during the Exodus, Newark during the relocation of European expatriates who were leaving a Portuguese country in a communist regime. I can talk about the Cuban arrival in Newark and the departure. That's all lifelong Newark. I can talk about my experience with the African American population because where I was born and raised, my father was an old man with an 8th grade education, my mother was a waitress. There was no color, there was no distinction. We were all part of the same economic pile of mess down the east ward of Newark. So I'm a public school graduate, proud of it, Lafayette Street Grammar School, Eastside High School. I graduated high school with 428 kids, and we had more die from heroin-related AIDS than even attended college. That's a tough story. It's the very same similar story that persists in Newark. So from a Newarker, a lot of things haven't changed. From a businessman, I have a law firm of 135 lawyers, so we do so much work in Newark. We deal with the Panasonics and the Prudentials. We're seeing a renaissance. There's a true commercial renaissance as I see it in Newark. The arrival of these corporate giants, which are international corporate giants, means jobs, means ratables, means benefits. It's too early to tell the impact for me as to where we are on the corporate expansion that we're seeing. I don't know what comes first or what's more important. Is it residences or is it jobs? We saw 1180 Grand Boulevard be built with a lot of residences, and we saw it fail because it didn't have support around it. Now we're seeing jobs being created. So from a Newarker, there's a lot that's the same. I think the same problems that plagued my high school experience. plaguing a lot of the kids today. The gang mentality that's pervasive in Newark was just as pervasive when I was a child. It was just a different sort of organized crime element that came from a different place. I do see right now a stabilization. So from that perspective, I see some stabilization. Do I see rapid improvement? It's tough to come back from an exodus like Newark had, in the late 60s and the early 70s. We lost half of our population. But there's an infrastructure here that can be rebuilt. Will it be rebuilt for Yorkers? I think so. Will it be rebuilt for non-Yorkers who will come here? I hope so. The biggest problem, I think, plaguing Newark right now is that we probably have about 10,000 college graduates a year from institutions within the city, and maybe buying those number, but we're probably keeping just a small piece of that reside here. So we're educating the workers, we're developing the workers, but workers leave the work, and that's been a big problem. On the business side, I think we're midstream. I think developers are starting to believe in Newark. I think that we've had a couple of administrations, especially the present administration, that's done so much in a year to give credence and credibility to what can be done. I'm not saying that because bias sitting next to me. I'm saying it because it's true. You go to City Hall and people are there. You go to City Hall and people are responsive. You go to City Hall and you get solutions. You don't get problems. That's a big thing because people sat back and watched Newark and down. So we have the two Newarks. There's the Newark of the community and there's the downtown Newark. And I guess as we talk more and more, I'll share some more of my thoughts and my insights. And you may agree or you may disagree, but there's one thing that I'll tell you: Newark was not designed to have downtown residents. Newark was designed to have downtown business, and at 5 o'clock you went home to your residence. And what we're trying to do now, as I see it, is we're trying to build up a downtown core, and that can't be done at the sacrifice of the communities that have been here and that are in existence. So I see Newark right in the moment, in the middle place of trying to balance its constituency, the people that live in Newark, versus trying to balance the developers of business and the commercial interests, which Newark has always been an industrial city. Newark has always had to balance its constituents with its businesses, whether they were factory owners or beer meisters, and historically Newark citizens have come out a little bit on the short end of that stick. But we'll see. I'm very optimistic and very bullish about where we are. And the last thing I'll say is Newark's renaissance is absolutely part of the expansion of Manhattan. And if you see a contraction in Manhattan, people will fall back into Manhattan. It's happened historically. When you talk about the 3 or 4 starts that we've had, we follow the economy. As New York expanded and they got to the farthest outermost reaches of what I'll call the Roman Empire, the New York Empire, that was always Newark. And then when the collapse occurred, Newark got sucked in first. Hoboken always benefited, was the first stop on the path. Newark's the last stop on the path. You've got to be careful because we now have a new intervening factor. It's called Harrison, New Jersey. And all you have to do is drive there. And I think that Harrison is just lopping off those that would be coming one more stop to Newark because it's being built at such a rapid pace. And I think that's the consideration that we have to talk about.
Thank you, Frank. That's the theory of the path, I guess.
That kind of is also with multiple sort of spaces, obviously, currently on the deputy mayor. But I came here 25, 6 years ago. I got out of the military and I came into a college. I was actually going to school. I got into Rutgers and a part of it was a veteran. And so I've either lived or worked downtown off and on for the most part for the last 25, 26 years. Bleecker, Renaissance Towers, Halsey Street, James Street, I sort of bounced around, depending on where part of my life was. I was single, I was dating, had kids, I was sort of moving around these small zones at that point in time. And then obviously Lincoln Park, close culture district, really working to about that neighborhood, and which currently is one of the sort of highest residential neighborhoods in the city of Newark. And then now, so I've seen it just as a resident, as a sort of nonprofit developer now, it's everything there. And currently, Newark seems to have the most activity that I've seen in the last 25 years from either residential side or the professional side. Whether it's the Panasonics or the conversation with the casino that we're about to probably get into tonight, residential projects, paintings, NJPAC, the across the street project. So there's a lot happening here. The way I think it though is that we have our own agency with this, but I think a lot of it has to do with the economy. But whether or not the city redevelops or doesn't redevelopment and how it redevelops is really a function of what we do. The administration, the private sector, the public sector. What do we do to direct development? What decisions we make in terms of this process? For example, what are the projects that we support? Which projects don't we support? What do we do with the resources? Do we make sure that people in the city have jobs? There have historically been a lot of wealth in Newark. The jobs are at the airport, but you see that wealth in the greater region, whether that's Livingston or Montclair or Newwood, but those jobs for the most part are here, and people who are living in other places. If we can make the transition, not just that downtown is developed, but that our neighborhood is developed, and that in the process of the projects that are happening downtown, can people in Newark or residents work on those projects, and then use that to redevelop their homes and the neighborhoods throughout the city. To me, it seems like sort of like a tidal wave that's coming. Whether it, from Manhattan, you see what's happening in Newark, in Jersey City, you see what's happening in Harrison. The difference is that Newark is a deeper hole. We have an infrastructure. We don't have just one sort of train stop on the path. We have 6 train lines that are transit, plus we have the path line, plus we have the airport, plus we have 55,000 students, we have NJPAC, we have Prudential and Panasonic. So when it's here, it's going to it has to fill it. So, people talk about justification. I think on some levels, we're not there yet. The development hasn't happened yet. It's happening. When development happening, I think the people coming into the city doesn't necessarily mean that it's gentrification, because a lot of the stuff that's being developed isn't necessarily displacement of people. What's happening is that vacant buildings, vacant lots, brownfield sites are being developed. At least at this moment. Not that it won't be that at some moment, but at this moment right now, we're dealing with the vacancies and how to make those vacancies residential. What I'm trying to encourage people to do is to have ownership in this process, to make decisions about buying now. And jobs, to make sure that all projects that are coming here, one of the things that we did was make sure that 51% of the projects, that 51% of the tax savings, 51% of the jobs for projects are through the residents, as well as from minority businesses and women-owned businesses. We had 30% of your base. We started that first off. So we're supporting development, and we're being aggressive in supporting development. But we changed the numbers so that when that development happens, you have your businesses, you have minority businesses, you have women-owned businesses who are making a substantial amount of money from that. Because if the money doesn't, if the resources don't come into the city, then you're right, there will be a lot of displacement. Because the people here won't be able to afford it. But if we can capture the resources that are being spent on these development projects and keep them in Newark and have them circle a few times, then it's an opportunity for more people to.
Thank you, Mike. That sets out a whole set of issues that we're going to come back to throughout the conversation. But I want to now just get everybody's view on how the dialogue takes place. I told you made a point that there are multiple dialogues going here that don't necessarily seem to connect. Historically, in the world we live in, media plays a role in making that connection. Media in local communities like Newark has never been as weak and limited as it is today. That's an economic model changing. So in the absence of that kind of traditional media fabric that, at least in some communities, can help this discussion flourish, I can tell how does a discussion like this happen in Newark, and what can we as citizens of the community do to spur that conversation?
Oh, man. I mean, I think that usually this conversation happens in the way that it's happening now, you know, on a panel, but, you know, my belief is that it needs to happen more organically. And if we're gonna see any of our desired outcomes, which I hope are all inclusive and equally opportunistic, then there has to be some kind of real care and concern for Newarkers and the people, because the people are the pulse of, you know, everything that happens here. And I think, you know, it was so focused on our political agendas and on our artistic endeavors and on our, you know, development initiatives that we're forgetting just like basic human quality, which to me is about compassion care. So I might have, you know, digress a little bit, but the conversation usually happens like this on a panel, and then everybody goes home to that privileged seat, just like the ones we're sitting in, and nothing really happens like on the basic ground level. Not that nothing happens as far as like development. We see the development, you know, we see that, but nothing happens to actually change the climate 20 blocks from here. You know, we're talking about Newark and the revitalization and gentrification of Newark, but I mean, we're basically just downtown. And all the people 20 blocks from downtown are being totally left out. And, you know, it's just my belief, and I know I'm reiterating something that I already said, that those other people need to be here too. And it needs to come from the heart. And there's no heart in this to me. It's just all about politics and development, but there's no heart, there's no compassion, there's no real care or concern. And a lot of times, you know, we have these conversations in a very political way and in a very academic way. And even though those ways sound politically correct and grammatically correct, there's no true heart in them. You know, so I think we need to shift the way that we have this conversation, and it needs to be a continuum that involves action.
You're at work with locally and hopefully helping that conversation and creating the kind of conversation I can call is championing. What do you think?
Oh, I love it. I mean, Globally came out, or came into existence for the simple reason that all the good stories that was happening was not getting captured by the media. So we started talking about it. Then once we started talking about it, then other people said, you're right. And they started to create their own websites about talking about positive stories. So what's happening now is you have traditional media now looking back and saying, well, kind of miss this. So as you start to fill in a space that is voided, just as any type of entrepreneur model, you kind of find a way in which, if it grows, the standard bearers of media start to look at that. And they start to see, well, maybe we're missing something. So this conversation that we're having right now does not end tonight. It does not end in a panel discussion. And that is definitely not Globely's role here. My role here is to listen and hear from you. And if I don't speak to you today or tonight or tomorrow, that we have these further conversations, because the power of media that I kind of experienced over the last several years is that by these conversations, those conversations that meet the Ethernet of the world starts to change behavior. Whether or not the standard bearers want that or not, we as people with voices start to have those voices and have those conversations where they cannot be ignored. So I'm excited to be in this position because I feel comfortable that we don't need anyone else determining that but us. And regarding the community, I want to be very clear that I live in a very wonderful community in Newark that we look to be an example for others in the neighborhoods. We are a neighborhood, although we're a neighborhood in downtown Newark, we're still a community and neighborhood, which is a very important model that other communities can use. So I want to say, if you want your neighborhood changed, if you want to make things happen, let's start with you. And I imagine there are several members of my community here that would be more than happy to help you if you're willing to help change your neighborhood and be in control of that. So,
What is your neighborhood there?
my neighborhood is the James Street Historic District. It's the first historic district in New York, and it has institutions like the museum and library and row homes that look like Brooklyn. So when you talk about it as urban New Brooklyn, we're kind of saying, hey, yeah, we got brownstones. So I think, but the community came in the 70s and took out, burned out brownstones, and I moved in 2000, and my house was burnt out, and I remember seeing daylight from the third floor because we had rotten out floors, and made a commitment to invest in New York. And it seems that that level of commitment to invest and put your hard-working money in, my neighbors feel that they're entitled to protect their neighborhood, and they're at every meeting, from landmark commission to environmental control. They are active because they believe that they have put in so much stake in the community. So I enjoy this conversation and look forward to the challenges for those further repeating conversations.
And by the way, one of the things we try to talk about at our school and at our center that's throwing the conference is media entrepreneurialism. And to my left are two really powerful media entrepreneurs who try to make a difference with new initiatives. Cole is the publisher of a magazine, My Side, which deals with lots of very important issues in the community and in the larger community. And Derek's own publication, locally, is doing the same thing. So we're not exactly going to be able to look at the Star Ledger to necessarily over time provide great leadership around these things, but entrepreneurs are going to make a big difference. Your take on the media conversation, Dale?
Well, I think that covering development is a really tricky proposition because it doesn't happen all at once like an election or a plane crash or dropping a bomb or something. It happens, over decades, over years, and it takes incredible patience and attention to detail and to events and to people and to politics and to money and to power to stay on top of it. And, there's been some very good articles written about Newark lately. There was one in Politico, which is a magazine of national politics that comes out of Washington. I was reading in Bloomberg News like 2 years ago that it was 10 years ago that all of the land, there's 7 acres in downtown Newark, right around Broad and Market, some of the most valuable territory in Newark that was bought 10 years ago by a German billionaire who saw the value in it. And I thought it was interesting that I learned that from Bloomberg and not from anybody local. And then, of course, that same information appeared in the Politico article. And a couple of weeks ago, there was a really terrific piece on NPR about Clinton Hill and then the mayor's effort to improve that neighborhood. And it had really revealing, really granular interviews with people who lived there, some who saw improvement already and some who didn't. But it was just, I think that is the kind of thing that needs to be happening on a daily basis, a real understanding of who's benefiting, who's not benefiting, who's being left out, who's being included. These things take a lot of time and a lot of attention, and I don't think that anybody can expect that, a national publication that comes and drops into Newark and writes an article and then leaves is going to give people the information they need to really govern themselves. I mean, this is about making choices, informed choices, and people need a lot of information to make those choices. Abby Cole was talking about who's being left out of the conversation. I spent a lot of the last 4 years just in neighborhoods where public schools are located and talking to parents and community members, and that they don't feel that they're seeing any benefit or that they will see any benefit from development in Newark, because their perspective is this happens all the time. Big money comes into Newark, we get screwed, and the outsiders get rich. And there's no perspective from there that this is going to make a difference in the neighborhoods. And I think, that's where there needs to be, I don't know if there needs to be a blog or there needs to be some nonprofit that funds a website that covers development, but I think that it needs to be something that's done in a very sustained and attentive way, because it involves everybody and it involves the life of the city and the life of the people and nobody's going to really have any control over it unless they know what's happening.
Thanks, Dale. Frank?
Well, Newark, in my opinion, all I can give you is my opinion, is always historically a segmented city. You're from the East Ward, or the North Ward, or the South Ward, and even if you were in a ward, sometimes you identify yourself as the section of the city that you're from. And so I always tell the story that I think that Newark was like Italy before the unification. It was a bunch of municipalities that operated independently. A good example of that, talking about some politics, is that Newark is the only city in New Jersey that doesn't have a chairman, a political chairman. It doesn't have a Republican political chairman, it doesn't have a Democratic political chairman. It has 5. Each ward has its own independent political chairman. Newark is the only city in New Jersey that I know about that a ward councilman has, in most respects, more power than a councilman or councilwoman at large. And it's because of the way the zoning and planning laws are written that just about everything needs a variance in Newark. And what's that all about? It's a historical perspective that when the council that used to select the mayor of Newark gave it up to popular election, it retained all this development power so that you had to go to the ward council as opposed to just going to a central agency. Newark is decentralized in the concept of the business community is one Newark today, and then the resident community is another Newark today. I watch the business community struggle with how it can support and how it can integrate itself into the lives of the resident community. But it seems to be a difficult task. I see you have some people here in the audience tonight that are great community leaders that interface as much as they can with the corporate community. I still think it's got a way to go, and that's one of the big problems is this multiple faceted Newark. Newark doesn't even elect a mayor or a council person based on a political party system. It's a nonpartisan election. The courts don't want to maintain this independent structure that's different from the other municipalities around. So when you watch some of the other municipalities and you say, well, gee, things look a little bit easier there, it really is from a political governmental standpoint. There's a little bit more of a unification as opposed to this check and balance of Newark governmental. From a media standpoint, I used to be a partner in a local newspaper in Newark and in a local television station. It was very, very difficult because the revenues couldn't increase with the cost of production. And that's part of the development problem in Newark too. We don't have yet the rental structure that supports the cost of construction in Newark. But for the subsidies that the state and the city administers and they're well thought about the way they do these things, you wouldn't probably have all the development that you have in Newark right now. It's a subsidy-based game, and if you can't get the formula to work right, I've seen many developers come here and say, I just can't do that type of development. The rental structure, whether it's commercial rents or residential rents, don't support the cost of construction. So we have some challenges. It does look like sometimes it fits in spurts, but we suffer with the macroeconomics too. Every time we get going, there's a slowdown because there's this cyclical financial wave that runs through all of our lives. And Newark just doesn't have the fiscal stability yet to hold on when the roller coaster goes down, and so we feel it a little bit more dramatically than perhaps other towns in New Jersey and in the Northeast.
Thanks, Frank. By the public discussion, what do we do about the public discussion and the media circumstance in Newark, which was my question on this round?
It's been interesting since I've come into the administration in July. And so we've actually gotten rather sort of more favorable media nationally and locally. Whether it's Bloomberg or NPR, we're really prioritizing our resources in the neighborhood, at least in terms of what is happening with the city's resources as they can initiate development in neighborhoods. But what seems to happen is that the local bias in media, and even our own psyche about Newark, is some of the groundwork that lays down for gentrification to happen. And we also value the city currently ourselves, or the media doesn't sort of talk about in a way that's positive, then local residents may not have the sort of same interpretation of it. But what ends up happening is you have sort of national or regional publications, whether it's the Wall Street Journal articles or New York Times, or political talk about it, and then you have people coming from New York or Jersey City saying, oh, you know what, that train ride is 20 minutes in Manhattan. That house is $150,000. Why don't I buy that and live in Newark? And the residents who live there, who've been there for generations, don't have to benefit from it, and partly because the local story isn't a positive story. And I've seen that, and it's been a little bit sort of challenging and disheartening to sort of see like that there's all this sort of expectation about what's happening, and we're like, yo, why can't we get sort of the same stories, or even more nuanced, detailed stories about what's happening in the neighborhoods, whether it's the model neighborhoods that we're working on in the Null blocks or in the Clinton area, or the work that we did on Bergen Street, because we want the residents of Newark and to benefit from it first. But because there's really no sort of strong media infrastructure in Newark, those stories are not getting told in a way that is proliferating in the neighborhood. But we are able to pull on the Politico's, NPR, New York Times, and then they come to actual stories, and then you have billionaire investors from Germany coming in, buying stuff because the local developers don't value it.
Great points, Mike. We're going to open this discussion up to you all very soon. There are mics in each of the alleyways. You have questions which you're shepherding to people, I hope, that are working those aisles from cards we gave you. Please join the conversation. We'll come to you all in the audience as soon as we see you at the mics. So what is it going to take at this crossroads? It seems like you all view this as a crossroads, although from different perspectives. What is it going to take to get us on the right side of that crossroads so that we solve both the human problem and the economic problem simultaneously? Right?
Well, no, one of the things that we're doing right now is we are focused on jobs as part of it. We realize that without jobs, without local jobs, this will not benefit Newark residents. So focusing on jobs, on all the parts that come through is important. Mayor created a definitely full employment that's really singularly focused on the job creation portion of it. Plus, we're working on projects at the port, the airport, so there's just a high level of employment. I think the second portion of it is we are trying to make the process more efficient, so that more projects happen. We're starting in the neighborhoods so that there's value created, increased value created with municipal resources in the neighborhoods, which then provides sort of a space for those particular neighborhoods to begin to stabilize and hopefully flourish. So the crossroads in terms of the timing is how do you capture the resources that are happening, and I think first and foremost is about jobs.
Akatola, how are we going to get, thank you, Mike. Akatola, how are we going to get through this crossroads in a way that not only the business community, but the community at large can feel better about what's going to take? We need to get to the microphone.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure that we're going to get through this in a way that you said the community feels good as well about what's happening. Yeah, I'm not sure that I believe that, because I know that it takes real heart, compassion, inclusion, concern for all humanity, for the have-nots, for the poor, for the disenfranchised, for the criminal. And I don't think that on the whole Newark has that kind of compassion for those groups that I just mentioned. And I think without that, it's not going to happen. But I think in an ideal, idea, it would happen just by including the people that are being left out. We all know who those people are. We all know who the average Newark resident is. It's about listening to them and addressing their needs and meeting them where they're at. And kind of stepping back from our own agendas for a second and really evaluating what are the needs of the people and of the community, and then doing something to address those needs.
Derek, what's it going to take from your point of view at this crossroads to get on the right side of that?
Well, I'm just listening to Akintola, and I'm really trying to think through how we can meet his vision. And I'm struggling because, you know, it's the simple inertia of economics which really drives development, right? So you have the cost of purchasing a property, the ability of getting a loan, and the ability of actually developing the property to increase its value. So the community that he's identified and discussed, we have to look at it with the economic construct. It still has to have this traditional requirement of getting financing and funding, and that seems to be a very serious problem to actually get funding for development. And so I'm really thinking through how do you do that. But I will say one thing. He mentioned about communities, and one thing I've learned about coming into a whole community like the one I live in, because it identified itself historically, it encouraged and motivated people to learn about its history. And even if you did not see it, the current condition of it might be negative, but yet we understood the history of the place as having these positive attributes. And then once we look back and focus, we realize that those positive assets that it had did not disappear. We just forgot about it, or because someone else didn't appreciate it and we didn't appreciate it either. So one of the first things that I think needs to happen for most communities in New York is start taking appreciation of the place that you live. I remember growing up in the South Ward, and as Frank mentioned, people talked about which ward they came from. Well, that was a discussion of pride. You came from the South Ward, you took care of the South Ward. You took care of where you live. And I think that understanding the history of the place that you live starts with you taking care of where you live. And once you start doing that, you can encourage other people to come in and help you invest. But if you're not taking care of your area and proud of the area that you live in, you're not going to be able to get those resources necessary. And so I'm still, as we're discussing this, I'm trying to figure out how you can get resources to an area that desperately needs it without first looking at the positive attributes that area has, regardless of what you currently perceive it to be now.
Thank you, Derek. I wonder if, Christopher Watson, you're here in the front row, and I see you taking notes, and you might have a lot to add to this, especially from a neighborhood perspective about Newark and where it's going. Would you mind going to the mic and sharing some of your thoughts? Either mic, that's fine.
Well, I'm here first as a Newark resident, and then as an academic who's pursuing a PhD in the subject area. And I really appreciate the conversation so far, but I think before we can move on, we are yet defining gentrification in this discussion, because it takes on so many meanings. And if you're to go with the populist definition of gentrification, we're talking about displacement. And I want to agree with Bayo that I think that we're not displacing Newark at this time. Newark is yet to be capacity based on the loss of population we've had over the past 40, 50 years. And as I move around Newark, this landscape is just dotted with abandonment and blight. And we first have to now recreate the environment so that communities can be knitted back together, because there's this broken down community here in Newark. But then I'm also hearing this conversation being followed in a cooperative way, where we're talking about developers are finally believing in Newark. Well, developers don't believe in community, they believe in profits. So when we talk about gentrification, we need to define that. And I just think I have some problems with the whole labeling of this discussion, Renaissance. I mean, Renaissance antithesis death. I didn't think Newark was ever a dying city or ever died. People were still here. So if we talk about the Renaissance, what are we resurrecting? Are we resurrecting the jazz clubs uphill, or are we now commodifying these spaces with what was historically labeled as the dominant culture? Are we Starbucks in Newark? Are we Whole Foods in Newark? Because that to me is not Renaissance. It's something new, you know. And So I just would like for us to start talking about the true of what Newark means. We really need to bring back those 200,000 people that we lost. We really need to bring back the middle class into this city. Another area of gentrification, I think it's racist undertone, because it's when we talk about when white people come back in. I think I'm a gentry here, you know. My wife is a physician, I'm pursuing a PhD here in the middle class family. We bought a house in Newark. Now, had we been white, or most of the people who moved the past 10 years have been doing this, then, you know, the things on this ill, am I not a gentry?
I think there's a lot that was said and it's absolutely correct. We don't have to sort of think about it being, Renaissance gentrification, but how we develop the city the best way for the residents and prioritize that, how we structure our economy in a way that the residents of Newark get the most out of it. And I think that a lot of the conversation about gentrification or Renaissance in Newark is about thinking about the sort of glory days in Newark that was 50, 60, 70, 100 years ago. And when the reality was the city has always been a working class city. It's always had immigrants. It's always been a history of segregation. And so we sort of romanticize something that really wasn't that good to be, wasn't beneficial for everyone to begin. And so now we have this opportunity to move forward, not just to look back. And we all want to do something this is happening because the rebellion happened so long ago. I mean, it happened before I was born. And so I don't remember the city that people are talking about. Like when I in the 80s, when I came here and I was in high school, these cities look like they look. Now, they actually look better now than they did back then. And so they were, in terms of the crime, the violence, the danger. And so as we move forward, what are we doing for the residents, for the children, so that they want to stay, that they don't see that when they get 18, that they want to escape, go somewhere else, go to the suburbs, go to some other state, that they actually graduate from high school, go to college here, get a job here, raise a family here, that we have a diverse enough economy and diversity in neighborhoods, that there's options for them in terms of where they live. They may say, I want to live downtown, I have any kids want to hang out here, or I want to start a family, I want to move to Southwood, or I want to move to a senior building here. Like you have that in New York City. One of the things I like about New York City is that there's multiple neighborhoods for multiple classes. And you can live where you decide, you can be in Harlem, but the dynamic aspect of the city is one that there's a lot of variety. And so can we have that variety here? Newark just not be labeled as, a bunch of outsiders, but an opportunity for us to live beautiful lives.
Thanks, buddy. That's inspiring. To the microphone here, the first person, please.
Hello, my name is James Cunningham. I moved to Newark about 5 years ago. I just want to say hi to Derek. I haven't seen you in a couple of years. One of the first people I met when I came here, I'm a publicist and entertainment. And when I hear you guys talk about media, it's really disheartening because the media's here. They just choose not to talk about the positive things. It's not about, it's not a big enough story. They just choose not to. Doom and gloom always sells, okay? I'll give you an example. My dad's 85. I've been here 5 years. He moved to Newark from South Carolina. And I'll tell you, it's the first time he came to visit me in 5 years. He saw the news, he came downtown with my sister, went to a couple of restaurants, because I have relatives at restaurants downtown, and he was impressed. 85. So that tells you something. We must be doing something right. But I guess my big question is, you talked about gentrification. This gentrification, I don't care how you call it, whether it's residential, commercial. I live in Boston, Chicago. I was in Jersey City in '95 with a change. It's gentrification. Okay, let's keep it real. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's a good thing, as long as everybody's included. And I guess what I'm saying is that you have residents in Newark who have no services. It's one of the largest cities in Newark, if not the largest. And you can't get anything. It's like you call City Hall, you can't find out. You got to kind of pick and choose and find out what's going on. And that's not a problem. It just takes time. I know to get it together. But I guess what I want to know is, what are you going to do for Newark as a whole? Okay, you talked about real estate development. That's great.
Thank you.
But-
That's, your question is clear.
Hold on a second.
Okay.
You got a dock lot, you have a dead zone in the city. What are we gonna do to incorporate and bring all these people back into the fold, as opposed to just downtown?
Thank you. Want to take a crack at that? You're the elected official. You're the official. You're working for the elected official.
So I appreciate the comment. I think that the main thing is the services. I mean, I think what happens, and when I think of gentrification, I think of, all right, this same area, once more wealthy people move into the area, they need services. So whether it's policing, or whether it's fire, or whatever type of, maybe the streets are getting cleaned, that's when I feel like that the municipalities pay more attention to a place once a new income of people come into it. For me, that's one of the indications of a neighborhood being gentrified. I know that for us, the city of Newark, and the mayor and myself, that we're prioritizing it. Right now, we have 2 model neighborhoods that we're working on. One is around Second Hill, and one is around the number blocks. In terms of leveraging our municipal resources to do that, one thing we did was, the Diamond Lot, the Valentine's Day sale. We're doing some auctions this year, but if we providing as inexpensive as we can opportunities for people to purchase land and have ownership and then build, and we're helping to manage people, we're providing people with a support system, so they're not just out there doing it by themselves, but they have the infrastructure expertise in the municipality. So increasing the opportunity in the neighborhoods, providing it at the most affordable level we can, and increasing the services. I mean, I think that there's work that the police department's done. It's not, things take time. I think that the resident is doing a good job in terms of this overall working on it. We're also really present. I know you've been seeing the man sort of occupy the block, obviously we're working on over here, where the city is coming in to work to stop and reduce crime. But I think that's the most important part that we can do, is really make sure that these neighborhoods are improving with all the resources kept, not the priority.
Can I just say something? I don't want to monopolize.
Please, we got a lot of people waiting.
I know that, but you guys talk for an hour.
Sure.
What we're talking about, just so people don't know, first-time buyers, $60,000 you'll get in county investments. Apply.
Great point. Thank you. Going over to this microphone now, please.
I'm Bob Tennant from WBGO, and I think that because it's about media, that opening video that set the stage, I have an address for you that you should check out, which wasn't included there, which is 3537 Brookdale in Dalesburg, where in 2012, 3 children, a teenager and an adult, were killed because squatters who were doing something they should have been doing started a fire in the vacant home, and it killed those people. So this brought the point of academic reality. I'm kind of surprised that we haven't mentioned the major foreclosure crisis, which is still going through today. And the largest destruction of black household wealth in generations. I know President Obama is in the White House, but when this happened, I don't understand how we can't talk about it. Over 50% of the mortgages in this town are underwater. I don't mean Sandy, that was also a problem. For some reason, the media conceptualizes Sandy as being a Jersey Shore, because Chris Ritchie told them that's where it was, because there was a roller coaster in the circuit. But Sandy came up in here and did some serious damage with the Superfund site that came in into Iron Bound, where people on their own had to be their own first responders. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Response? Mortgages underwater? Right?
Yeah, that's absolutely a correct statement. And the court system of New Jersey, Newark of New Jersey, is absolutely inundated and so slow to respond that you can't even reach a court date to try to get to a resolution on it. So you wind up with squatters, and you wind up with deteriorating buildings, you wind up with a real loss, and so it's a good point. But I will say one thing, and this goes to the strength of Newark. It's not optimism, it's just realism. In 2007, when the whole world fell apart economically, and people's values elsewhere went to 20% or 30%, the intrinsic value of Newark kept a certain stability level, which was lower than that which we had expected before that. But Newark kind of bounced back a little bit quicker than other municipalities. You know, we did not lose all the value. Now, what's that all about? I mean, it's about the stability of the people, because we are a city that, contrary to other municipalities, has experienced growth. When I heard the statement on your video that we're a city of 300,000 souls, I mean, it wasn't too long ago that we were only 220,000 people living here. So you've got some stability of people, and you've got some sort of economic stability that's brought across by the airport, by the two railroad stations, by the intersection of highways, by the corporate giants, and they're here. I mean, you know, one thing about Jersey City you have to understand is the incredible apartment, you know, explosion that's going on. But Panasonic didn't go to Jersey City. Prudential didn't decide to build a new tower in Jersey City. There's no Whole Foods moving into Jersey City. These are things that we have to take cognizance of, that there is a recognition that there's a certain stability.
Thank you, Fred. Just a quick point. One of the things that we're doing, gentlemen just asked a question about mortgages. In our Westwood Mall neighborhood, we are, the council refers to the planning board to designate the area in need of redevelopment. One of the things we're doing is we're looking at the underlying mortgages as a part of the consideration for eminent domain of a building site. It hasn't been done in the country. We're including it in one of the variables. It's probably go back to the council in a couple of months. But it's you know, the first time where some of the municipalities looking at underwater mortgages as one of the contributing factors, because you know, in terms of the economic development, we get properties active in foreclosure form. But if there's an indication early on that underwater mortgages won't lead to foreclosure, because of reset those underwater mortgages and keep people in their homes, they wouldn't become foreclosed, they wouldn't end up being a property that the city has to maintain. So we're trying to capture that a lot earlier. It's just that there's no precedent in the country, so we're the first out in the country trying to address that issue.
Thank you. So the microphone on my right, please.
Hi, my name is Grace Alexander, and I have a question. It's concerning the eminent domain. Before the mayor was elected, he made a commitment to us, taxpayers, to see that the toxic mortgages from trust in order to keep families in their home. You know, what is the status of this policy? When does the mayor plan to present this policy to the council for approval? Look, one of my homeowners, my friend, she's right now, the bank is taking her house away, and she had a heart attack, now she has cancer. You know, come on guys, what are you guys doing for us? We are going through, I am too. The banks are serving foreclosure papers. What are you guys doing for us? You talk about this body coming in and doing this and this. What happened to the homeowners that are going through the struggle? Come on guys, do something for us. Everybody's going to live on the street. Who's going to buy all the business when you get all these business in Newark? Who is going to shop at the big fancy stores that you're going to bring here? Everybody's going to be on the streets.
I am afraid that's true.
So, it's actually a question I was answering that we've done, the council has already sent that to the planning board. And so what we're trying, that's happened already. So it's gone from the council to the planning board, where the planning board is now doing a redevelopment plan to take those properties from the bank. So that's just the process. I mean, it's a process. We have to have a designated area in need of redevelopment before we take a property. And so we started the process, we started the legal process, we started the planning process to do that. It started about 2 months ago. So there wasn't a lot of media on it. I don't know why, but there wasn't a lot of media over there. But we did our press release, we sent it out, and so the process started.
I hope you guys don't take too long. My friend might be dead by the time you guys are done.
To the microphone on my left, please.
My name is Emma Lopez. I'm an artist originated in the State School Gallery in Faro. Sorry. when we're actually in community with each other, when we're truly in community with each other, we're responsible to each other, we're accountable to each other for what we say and how we listen to each other. So I personally think as an artist, we have a responsibility to resist and refuse language from the media, especially the kind of mainstream media, when it decides to take an interest in redeveloping cities. You have to refuse to use these these words like territory and pioneer and frontier, things like that. Because again, it has been evoked by some of the panelists, that creates an image of a space that's empty. And it removes the authority of cultural production that's existed in a community. It removes that sense of a long history of cultural production and expression. And that tends to happen when the cultural production is often by folks of color. So it's very important to use language and be accountable to each other and listen to each other. But I'm really concerned about this issue of the downtown, because with the tax abatements and some of the things that have happened historically, what kind of public spaces are we creating for everyone to visit, to visit a space that's centrally located, to catch it on the bus from any of the wards? Because there's often this misimpression that artist-founded spaces are not small businesses, that nonprofits are somehow not like other kinds of small businesses. And I don't work for art buyers, really. I work for people on the night shift who see the art that we put in windows coming home. And I work for grandparents who have small children who are looking for things to do that are free and high quality to do. So because of the people that I work for, I have a limited ability to pay commercial rent. I can't just let the market take over, as was mentioned. And I'm just curious what kind of spaces we're creating long term, and again, how we're accountable to each other. What face does the left side of the Prudential Center give us when we walk by on a hot day? And you are right, there's a parking lot that's also increasing this baking heat. What is the face that we are creating? And
thank you.
All right.
I'd like to.
I'll take a quick shot at it. I'll take a quick shot at it, and I'm not part of the government, but just recently, I saw the redevelopment of Military Park, which I think has to be employed. I think that was a fundamental private initiative. I see Joe Delafave somewhere in the audience, and if you don't recognize what those guys did on a public-private partnership with the walkway, Joe, you're here somewhere, and with what the organization Spark did in conjunction with the county and municipality to get the new riverfront park that's in the Ironbound section of Newark, then you're missing something, because that's just an incredible venue over there with the tennis courts and the active and passive participation. So I know of again, as a non-governmental guy, I know of those things. I know that this mayor's initiative with parks has been pretty good. And I think you've got a lot of parks that existed that have just gone to pot. I've had conversations with Derek in the past about his initiative to bring the private constituents, and we've got some commitments from some public money to go into Washington Park and really redevelop that, because if you want to see a park that's dedicated to public art, there's more. I learned this from Derek. There's more public statuary in Washington Park than anywhere else in Newark, and we've got some trees that need to be attended to. We've got some irrigation that needs to get in there. But I do think that there has been, from my observation, an emphasis from both the county and the municipal level, specifically about generating parks, and I know the emphasis that BIA puts on me on a daily basis about completing the Passaic River walkway, and the mayor always back in my head about, we gotta get what was Ministry Park and what these guys did in the Ironbound, we gotta get it going on this side of the Jackson Street Bridge and keep it going. So there's, in my opinion, as an attorney and as a private citizen, I do see that as.
Thank you, Frank. There was someone over here in reaction to that, please.
Yeah, so, okay. So, I want to address the fact that, the brother, just discussed that the developers don't really care about the community in the sense of they care more about wealth. And that's a huge issue here, because there are some people like me and maybe Anatola and some of the opinion leaders that want to go to these areas and do the work. And these developers are only distributing these venues for certain people that they feel that they can trust. If you can't trust a Newarker, to help other Newarkers, or then that says to me that you don't care, because we have to go there where you don't want to go to help these kids. These kids need to see art. They need to do programs inside these wards, in the toughest wards. You know what I mean? The money that we're allocating to the galleries, and Gallery Barrel is a great gallery, and we have to actually go to them to get space. But the developers need to actually help us get in the community, to develop, some type of interest in something else than crime. Another opportunity. And with the big corporations, we need to train, residents so they actually can do the job. But ultimately, we need to, pay attention to the people that want to do the work. You might not want to do the work. And I come to these panels and we talk about it, but after this, like Akatola says, no one does the work. I want to go do the work, and it's important. It's important. It's important that we go there, and it's going to be challenging when we go. I'm not saying that. But there has to be some type of investment in that, for Newarkers.
Thank you. The mic over here, please. Okay. We'll go to Orange, sorry.
That's okay. Lindsay McDonald Carter. I'm older than you, Frank. I'm over 60. I've been a resident in the city for over 61 years. Just to give a little context, really a reaction and some concerns or considerations I want people to take note. One is that I think what's most important for those of us who've been here before and after the rebellion and actually stabilize the city so that other people can come in, that they just want to be respected. That's the first thing. The second thing is that with regard to community, I grew up in public housing. We had a community. We had a community that made people accountable, but this is before the drugs. And we're not dealing with the fact that there's 45 years of heroin in the city. 45 years. The media only looks at the outcomes of that. The media doesn't take into consideration how it got here. And so that has a lot to do with the media and the coverage that we get in the city. The coverage that we get has never been the kind of coverage that we deserved since the rebellion of '67. So it's tainted everybody's perception, as you said, by people who live here. Their perception's been distorted. But there were communities here. Public housing had great communities. Great communities. I think the other thing for people to understand and realize in terms of things considered, the positions that pay the highest salaries in the state of New Jersey are positions of people who work in the city of Newark and do not live here. And many of those positions are paid for by the taxpayers in the city. So people need to realize that the people in the city are taxpayers, just like anybody else in this state. And we need to have the same respect as everybody else. People should not come in here for abatements and other kinds of subsidies at the expense of the taxpayers just to profit from. You need to bring something to the table. So I just wanted to make sure that when we're considering things, we consider respect for the people who live here, the fact that they are taxpayers, the fact that they had communities way before people who got here, and they need to be respected.
Thank you very much.
Senior study marketing. As a local native, I would definitely say that I'm also bothered by the fact that we're not discussing financial literacy, that we're not discussing HIV/AIDS prevention, that we're not discussing community empowerment. One thing that I was blessed with growing up was the fact that I knew that Broad Market was the business four-way intersection. I knew about the various businesses on the street. I knew about all the things that I thought made Newark a great city. And I don't think that's being instilled in the education that people my age and younger are receiving in Newark. Why is that not a part of the curriculum that you go to school and you learn about the city that you were born and raised in? You can't expect someone to see piss in the hallway all day and appreciate it. Whether it's their piss or not, that's all they know. That's what they're accustomed to. So before we start talking about these other businesses coming into the city, when are we going to start talking about helping the infrastructure, which are just people? There are many people in Newark who are suffering from mental disability. Again, we talked about heroin, we're talking about HIV/AIDS. Those type of things have been detrimental to the mindset of Northerners. And until we address that, we're not going to have any progress.
Yes, sir. You know, the last couple of speakers, I feel that now, what I see the issue is, and I'm glad we're having this conversation, but I want to make sure we understand what we are to get from this conversation. Half of the people here are journalists, and so we're having this conversation to reset the discussion. And some of the conversations that I've had, and one of the things locally attracted to work on, and you too haven't told, have been to tell the positive stories about Newark. And once you start doing that, you start letting people know that they are valued. Because some of the times we hear about these negative things and negative stories so much that we don't value the area that we're in. And then what happens is we have a developer that comes from somewhere else, and then they say, oh wow, I can see the dollars and cents of me making money here. And we get displaced out because we've heard the stories about our value being so valueless that we didn't see that we had a diamond in the rough. So my hope is that we continue this conversation, but more importantly, for organizations like me, is to go out to neighborhoods and talk about the positive stories about neighborhoods. There's no neighborhood that is so bad that has no good stories or good people that are trying to keep their neighborhood in check. And so those stories are what other people need to hear, because once they hear that other people are taking control of their community, they realize that they're not the only one there, and that there's ways that they can do it. And so I'm talking about empowerment, but I'm also talking about telling those positive stories so that the narrative that we hear is not just dark. And once you change that, you change young people's minds like a lot, and realize that it's not just about the piss. It's about other stories. And just to Akintola's first piece on Bastard Terrace gave me humanity. And so I'm saying that we can talk about stories that are tough, but give the humanity that changes people's minds. And that's our role as media. So I just want to still point this conversation that we're really talking about changing how media approaches Newark, that changes people's minds that read the news, because that's the issue. If Newarkers only hear about negative stories, they look at their areas as negative. And so if they see that there are other bright lights, then maybe they start to see it differently and have a different value for it and change. It changes by the people. And so that's what I'm hoping that media started with the people. They started to tell the truth, as the mayor kind of mentioned earlier today. So I'm hoping that that's the kind of conversation that we have. And people don't leave out of here frustrated, but let us use the micro, hyper, local people that are here that are talking about positive stories, and tell them about your stories, and tell them about your neighborhood, so that Newark is not recognized as just one barren negative place, because it's not.
Yeah, real quick, and kind of summarize what I'm hearing from the people and what Derek is saying. I think that we're not dealing with like the proper hierarchy of needs. You know, like when we talk about including the community, their basic needs are being addressed. So like this whole conversation is kind of irrelevant to them. You know, and of course, we sit in a seat that's fortunate enough to have this conversation. We some way feel that our ideas about the community and about Newark are parallel to the people who are discussing our community, and they're not. So I think we just need to do a little less talking and a little more listening, and then action, of course. But listening first, so that we meet people where they're at, because they're not where we are.
Fair enough. Question here, please.
Good evening. My name is Moira Sam, and I live in Newark. My question is, every day that passes we have a plan and a policy from the city of Newark to protect homeowners. Another day that the family loses their home and everything they worked for to achieve. This includes me. What is the Baraka administration plan to address foreclosures and the underwater mortgage crisis in Newark? And what is the timeline? I emphasize the timeline. What's the timeline?
Thank you. Timeline on addressing the mortgage crisis.
So, look, there's two things. One would be, as I mentioned earlier, is that within the Westwood Mountain neighborhood, we have included underwater mortgages as a one of the variables that contribute to life, and that we would like to use eminent domain to see that so we can actually set it. I also mentioned earlier that this has not been done at all nationally. So we're in a space where we're being really aggressive with the banks, with the courts, to try to do something to actually reset that. That is currently in the planning board. I suspect we'll go back to the council in another like 2 months, and then for adoption. And then we will have to sort of process for eminent domain. That takes some time. But it hasn't been done. There'll probably be a legal challenge to it just because it hasn't been done before. So I think we're being aggressive around it. But it's just the larger issue around foreclosures and the value of homes is a much more structural problem in terms of the economy. And how do we reset that? How do we help to create value? It's something that just hasn't, it just honestly hasn't been done. I think what we're going to do is try to do that in the most effective and efficient way that we can that creates the value.
Thank you.
Timeline?
Yeah, we're going back to the council in a couple of months, and then we're, depending on whether or not the, what happens once we have the adoption from the council, if there's a legal challenge from any of the banks, which we suspect there will be.
Question over here, please.
Yes, are you, first of all, my name is Shaki, I'm directly on this Purple Haze. And I'm a native New Yorker, and I've been in Newark for 20-something years, right? So as a teenager here, in the first largest development property, Society Hills, it's a very interesting experience coming over at that point. Many of us were from New York, our parents thought it was going to be an opportunity to have a community experience in a safe neighborhood surrounded by Prince Street, New Community, and New Hope and Lock Street. And it was a very courageous neighbor of mine that actually created a basketball tournament to bring all 5 neighborhoods together every Saturday for 3 years total. That created the type of people-to-people interactions that erased the lines. So, yes, my friends are from Lock Street, Prince Street, and I live in Society Hills. And it's that type of thinking, that type of courage, that type of creation that I'm going to ask you all to make sure those big businesses that come here take on when it comes to education. And so what I'm seeing, because I'm an arts education educator, and I'm in the schools watching the schools be under-serviced, limited resource. And that is probably the hub where we can do a lot of informing and rehabbing of neighborhoods, revitalizing souls and spirits, because that's where people are going to come and go. So Panasonic, what would it look like with them making sure there's initiative in school? What does it look like with these organizations adopting schools and making sure that their industry is represented in school and that is being taught? And I'm saying that because in my classes, this year I was working with 2nd through 12th grades all over the city of Newark. And something really interesting is most of my classes, they are, especially in 6th grade, they do not want to stay here. And as someone who returned from Charlotte, the city that definitely has been gentrified, and I chose to be in Newark, fortunately because of the Akintolas, the Valles, and the Mary Baracas, through the arts, they embraced me as an individual that had me revisit the city. And some organizations that do really interesting things in a couple of cities is the Dessert Club. And what I'm looking at is how undereducated our young people are in the city of Newark. The Dessert Club took me to Philadelphia, DC, and showed me the historical significance and the structure. Now, I wonder, is this being taught at NJPAC? Is this being taught at Rutgers? Are these students being partnered in our small schools? Do we have these conversations with young people and we hearing their ideas, getting that incubated, partnering with other youth? Because those college students are that midline to right here to start having those ideas be actually from concept to creation. And what is the process? How do you write a business plan and a proposal? And I know we have a lot of great organizations doing it, and it's still not enough, truthfully, because again, I'm still seeing 2 or 3 social workers in the school. So again, I just want to reframe what I'm asking, what I'm saying. So I have great stories from young people, but are they being captured? Are they being supported? Are they being funded to get out to a larger? So are they on a strike? Are they on a Panasonic commercial? Are there videos being shown in Prudential Center during the games so that we can reframe how the visitors who come through Newark for the games, how they can see how Newark sees, will have success. And very specifically, I want to make sure, because I definitely saw young people when I'm with older people, I'll tell you all what they said. And there's a song that was just created by the Institute of Music of Children. I had the opportunity to facilitate this program in one of the Southport schools. And the lyrics that they wrote in their book is, one moment. Okay. Basically, I pretty much know it if I think about it. But they said, some get killed, some die, but we live, and it's rough out here, but we love it. But we're still young, we have fun, because we live out here and we love it. They're talking about Newark. After a conversation, you have to be in conversation with young people, because they don't want to be here. But if we can share what goal we see, and have them be revitalized and take them around their city and show them.
Thank you. Thank you. There's particular points about business plans and helping organizations get their grounding.
I mean, well, there are organizations that we publish that really zero in on economic literacy. There's actually 2. There's a woman that actually was on VLS trying to get 1,000 women. Exactly. Exactly. So there are, sorry, 10,000, that's even better, you're right. And so you definitely do have the financial literacy message, and we can actually publish more stories like that. We can also publish the stories about the arts and what the young people are doing. Those are the stories that more times than not are not being carried by the standard regular media. So again, as we start to tell those stories, more young people will hear these stories and they'll say they're like me. And so again, we can start changing the narrative that we see. I mean, the narrative and story is not going to be changed by anyone except us. Okay. And yeah, so we want to have it. So you talk to me and we'll actually work on publishing our.
Thank you, Derek. I'm going to try to go through a few last comments really quickly. So in order to give everybody a shot. Sir, here, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Roger. A crazy thing happened in the last couple of weeks. There was a lot of chatter in the media about the city considering bringing in a casino here. But that conversation occurred before any about solving the foreclosure crisis that is causing hotspots of crime and trash debris building up. But don't worry, Derek, I got you. There's a positive story in this because the mayor has actually supported working with nonprofits to turn these homes into affordable housing. As a matter of fact, the city passed a resolution in February, right, urging the sale of severely delinquent mortgages to nonprofits for foreclosure prevention and affordable housing strategies, keeping people in Newark and stemming the outflow of African American and Latino working class families from the Northeast, which is an epidemic proportions, and some scholars are arguing is actually larger than the Great Migration of the pre-war era. It's my understanding, and I have this in writing actually, that a dozen mayors, because you're proud of pioneering, but sometimes being a pioneer in these initiatives by it, you know, you mentioned being the first, you know, and needing to lead, but there's a dozen mayors now supporting the strategy, including Los Angeles and Pittsburgh, in terms of the sale of severely delinquent mortgages.
I'm gonna have to cut you off.
What are the next steps the city plans to make to move this forward, and without resorting to neoliberal vague generalities, what is the timetable for its completion?
Thank you.
And I'm just gonna say, so one thing you have not heard me say, I'm a pioneer. I am not a pilgrim. This is not right. So let's just be clear on that. That's not the language that I'm using about this. Is that we are pioneers. That we are pilgrims. That Native Americans want to hear first. So you're not going to have me put me in that position. You say that to somebody else. Secondly, and more importantly, is that we're working on the foreclosure crisis, and we've actually been acting more aggressive. What you don't have the other cities doing is actually trying to use the eminent domain to take the properties. So they're including it in their legislation, they're including it in their resolutions, but what they have not done, and none of them have done that, is actually say we're going to take a property because it's underwater. So if you have that, and I know that because that's what we're working on. So if you actually have that language, show me which city is doing that through eminent domain. Not a resolution studying it. Actually use it in a redevelopment plan to take it. It's not one of the country.
Want to get a couple more. Come on over here, please.
My name is Laura Cole. I'm state officer with the Sierra Club. I came to Newark in 2002 to help defend the neighborhoods against a horrific, horrible, terrible, toxic disaster called the Newark Covanta incinerator. We were not very successful in stopping that project. However, I met people along the way from Newark who I'd like to hear from tonight, because you do have gentrificators living already in Newark, and they're disgusted because there's surface parking lots going up around their offices. I was called in by an architectural firm. Wonderful people, fantastic business. All the buildings around them are being torn down on the weekends without permits. And a person like Bill Chappelle, who's sitting in the audience, we'd like to hear a little bit more from him so that he could tell us more about what he's witnessing in his neighborhood.
Thank you. Bill, would you like to come on? You've been sitting there patiently. We got to get you the mic. Can we get a mic?
Well, while he's getting his mic, I just want to say that globally, Newark covered those articles that Bill Chappelle or Bill Chappell was.
Yes, Bill.
Forgive me for not staying. My knees are worn out from going to city council meetings. The mayor kindly gave our neighborhood, the James Street Historic Commons, a nod earlier this evening, and in the context that our neighbors are fully engaged in so many levels. We keep track. I think I mentioned this before, Derek, being one of our neighbors. We watch development issues from every angle. We watch surface parking issues, and the James Street Historic District is, in its core, gentrification, but it's not all bad either. My wife and I bought a house from the city of Newark 34 years ago at auction, a building that probably would have been torn down. And yes, there were some people living in the building at that time that were severely challenged. I know one in particular ended up better off when the city vacated the building. She ended up in senior housing. She had alcohol problems. So there were some severe problems in my house and in the neighborhood. Everyone that has lived in the James Street Commons for the last 30 years have heard someone say, when they come through our neighborhood, oh, I had no idea there was such a beautiful neighborhood in Newark. And I've come to believe that just us maintaining our houses and being visible has brought value to the table. Sure, it's gentrification, but I think in a positive way. I think it shows the way, not just to developers, that there's possibilities there, but to other neighborhoods. And if you stick with it, you stay at it, and work at it, you can make a difference. And I think that's really the value of the James Street Commons being what I call Newark's downtown neighborhood.
Thank you, Bill. That's great to hear. Gentleman in red here, please.
My name is Richard Ariza. I think that there's a missing element in this discussion around gentrification. And that is that I think out of the housing stock, of the good housing stock in this city, a lot of us would have been pushed out of it had it not been that for the past year, there's been an ongoing fight between tenants associations and the city landlords, where we have last year passed a new rent control ordinance that has protected the tenants, saved us a lot of money. And this has been an ongoing battle for the past year. The landlord groups have taken the city to court, the tenant organizations, and lots of new tenants who have been mobilized and gone to City Hall and have been engaged in this fight. We're trying to intervene in the lawsuit to defend the rent control ordinance that was passed last year and to strengthen the rent control laws. Otherwise, they would have, and there's actually now proposals that are being brought to the council to bring in through a backdoor and loopholes vacancy fee control into the city. That would begin to push out a lot of the people who have lived. I've lived in my apartment on Mount Prospect for 17 years now. Yeah, I was a postal worker, I'm retired. If I moved out of my apartment, I couldn't afford to move back into it. And that's rent control that protects us. That's what's kept that aspect of gentrification from moving forward in the city. And the fact that there's a lack of media that has covered this ongoing fight so that it has been harder for us to reach out and do it mouth to mouth, going to meetings to other people, meeting other groups, and there has been a flourishing of tenant groups being involved in this struggle. And there are a lot of struggles like this in the city. The fight to save St. Michael's Hospital, the fact that students in the city have gone out to fight to get back control of the city schools. That's the future of the city, that the people themselves are taking up these struggles and these issues. And fortunately, you know, the mayor has been on the right side of some of these things, and that's a good thing for us. The council hasn't always been on the right side of it, but it's an ongoing fight, and it's not really, unfortunately, it's not a conversation, it's a battle. It's a battle between the people themselves and this process of those who would exploit the needs of the city.
I agree with that. One of the things I think that's been really, that has helped in terms of hopefully long-term lessening the blow of displacement is the rent control ordinance that was passed by administration. It's an amendment that I think is scheduled to go before the council on Wednesday. But the goal has been to really provide an opportunity for residents to stay in the home long-term. And to stay and make sure that property owners can't force people out, do minimal in terms of repairs, and then increase the rent substantially. And so we've been working to ensure that, along with all these other projects, so we're working to increase home ownership in the neighborhoods, and we do develop properties on sort of on vacant or blighted land, and have strong rent control ordinance to make sure that tenants can have affordable housing. These are sort of the multiple ways. You know, if you sort of look at any one piece of legislation, it may not be enough. When you sort of look at it cumulatively, this is the work that the administration is doing to ensure that there's a long-term level of affordability in the city of Newark.
Thank you. I'm afraid we're going to have to move toward wrap up before they turn the lights out on us. And I'm wondering if any of the panel have a closing crisp thought. Nicole?
You have to get these last two.
I don't know who's saying that, but there could be two more. There's two over here. So we're out of here at 9. So, okay. Okay. All right, go ahead. In the black shirt, quickly.
David Daniel, I'm the local chair of the Sierra Club. And we're trying to focus on urban issues with the Gateway Group. And Bill Chappell is one of our representatives. Laura is with the state group. We partner with a lot of people who are here, like Joe Delafava, and I see that Kim Gavin is here, and also Rich Camp Marrera. What I see here is a tremendous turnout. This really wasn't that well publicized. I kind of found out of it. And I think we should enlist all of these people to continue this discussion, continue this involvement. And the gentleman said, the artist, that people don't feel involved, they don't feel included. And I think that would be a start. I didn't see people taking email addresses or names out front.
We have everyone's email address here properly registered, yes.
Well, I don't think there's a problem. I'd like to thank Montclair City.
We appreciate that, thank you.
My issue also, I'm just going to say things I'm talking about. I've been standing up here for 50 minutes. Is the homeless in Newark. There's a homeless issue. There's a tremendous line of people to get free lunches over at Montclair every day. There's litter everywhere. It's a lack of beauty. When you get on that ramp to jump onto there's litter everywhere. Where is the crime? Where, I mean, doesn't the mayor ever go up that street? Why don't we take, a street cleaner, clean it up? Another thing, yeah, I mentioned the mayor, somebody's bullying. I ran into the mayor. The mayor was on his way out as I was coming in. The mayor should have been here to listen.
That's right.
Wait, he had a schedule issue, he was very forthcoming.
All right, this is not a part.
That's not one of the issues is, I'm the city representative, you prioritize the way you get in and out of the city as opposed to where people live at. So that was your priority, so why isn't your view in and out of the city as good as the view of people, or better than the view that's here? The priority is for the residents, and not for people who just sort of come in and out, as opposed to 280 exits. The priority is for the people who live here, that's the priority. I'm just saying, it's coming to 280 walkway, which takes you to the west. That's what I'm saying.
When I started working in Newark with Band Brothers and other stores.
Okay, can we have your closing comment?
We don't have decent shopping here that brings people back after 5 o'clock and on Saturday and Sunday. So that's something that needs to be worked on. A friend of mine came down to the mayor's office and talked about developing a mall. Newark doesn't have a mall. There's empty properties where a mall could go up. I was in Patterson recently, they have a nice mall.
Okay, thank you. Moving over here to my right.
So we have to be through at 9, and we'd really like to tell you about the ways we'd like to continue this conversation. So we know that we still have some more comments, but we do have things in place to continue getting that information and using it. So Meryl, if you want to.
The woman here standing the mic, let's wrap up quickly.
My name is Deborah Fenninger. My question is to the mayor's office. The city of Newark, or the state.
Could you do us a favor and pose that question to him after the session?
Actually, no, because it goes back to something that Mr. Hamid presented at the very beginning in his presentation, because it addresses those people that live 20 blocks away from downtown. We have 16% of the prison population in New Jersey comes out of Essex County. But we've got all of these corporate giants coming into Essex County who are not hiring these men and women. And we need to have that addressed. And sustainability in the city. So what is the plan? What is the administration doing to address? Senator Rice and Ron Rice Jr. They introduced the block the box. Okay, you don't get the question on the application, but the background check still shows that. And many of these companies, they employ prisoners in the prison system to do their work, but they can't get jobs when they come back.
Great point. Last gentleman over here, please.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank everyone for attending. Merle, you did a great job moderating. My name is Tony Vaughn. I'm the owner and operator of wearenorth.com.org and welovenorth.com.org. So I encourage all of you to join We Love North and We Are North on Facebook right now. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. We really want everyone in the audience to have a chance to continue this conversation and to continue having community dialogues and the changes going on in Newark. And we've put in place a few ways to do so. So we've heard many points about the continuing of this dialogue. We hope to help you do so. We set up a phone number where you can call and leave your thoughts on tonight's subject, the redevelopment of Newark. We plan to make these comments available to the press and others, and use these comments to highlight voices of Newark residents and learn more about information needs. The phone number, hopefully displayed behind me soon, is 973-771-6397. That phone number, 973-771-6397. And if you didn't catch that, ask us later and we'll shepherd it your way. You're also going to be receiving an email with this information and other ways to opt into how we continue the conversation. Also coming up on Friday, October 16th, right here at NJPAC, our Center for Cooperative Media Montclair State's partner, NJ Spotlight, will bring together the state's top policymakers, business leaders, and activists for a day-long spotlight on cities. That's just a few months away, October 16th, right here at NJPAC. And tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the Robert Tree Hotel, where we're holding our national conference, we'll have a deeper dive onto this subject with a smaller group of people. If you're interested in participating in that conversation tomorrow, please see Claire, the woman who just raised her hand, Claire Laurel, and sign up with her immediately following the event outside the auditorium. Or you can write her, take down this address. Her name is Claire Laurel, and her address is C. Laurel, CLORELL at ASNE.org. C. Laurel at ASNE.org. Thank you very much, Claire, for your help on this. And a big thank you to all of you for your patience, your great comments, for coming tonight. I hope this is just another step in a vigorous, ongoing, productive conversation about the evolving city of Newark. Thank you all for coming tonight.